we'll give it a little bit to go, but hello to everybody who just joined, and we'll give people a couple minutes to trickle in and start get going. Apparently somebody's already saying nice to you, Ameet, so. Lovely Beverly.
All right, I was talking with muted still. Just said it's my friend Beverly.
Yeah, you guys do a podcast together, right?
Yeah, we used to do like an Instagram series, like an Instagram live series for a year. And then when I moved back to Edmonton, everything just kind of hit the wall and we stopped. And then when COVID hit, we were like, should we bring it back? So then we're like, podcasts are a lot easier to edit and she finds them more fun to do. So we're like, let's just do a podcast now.
Totally fair. All right, so looks like we have everybody on here. That is the fun gang we got going on. We got our little mini Hollywood Square going on, but very exciting stuff here. So I'm Madison Cote, just so everybody knows. I'm the community manager here at Homestead. Joining me today from the Homestead side, we've got Tegan Martin Drysdale, our leader. We've got Alicia Cacho, our lovely concierge, as well as Kirsten Vigelas, who is our membership manager. And I hope I didn't butcher her Dutch last name. It's a little tricky for me. I tried. Kirsten did an interview this morning completely in French on Radio Canada talking about our series. So she's our multilingual one down there for sure. I know I may give it away with my last name, but not so good at that. I'm actually a bit stronger in Mandarin than in French, so luckily we had Kirsten there to help us out there. So we're gonna kick it off now that we're at 12:02. I'm expecting some people keep trickling in, but you never know. So I just want to welcome everybody on behalf of Homestead and the team that we have here. We're super, super excited to start this series. And I just wanted to let everybody know before we get started, we are going to be recording the session. So, you know, look for a fun highlight reel that we'll be putting out afterwards, which is always our favorite thing to talk about. We normally have our Thursday think tank meetings that we've been moving to virtual, and those we've been recording and having a lot of fun with our members, but I'm really excited to bring this event to the rest of Edmonton and the rest of the community. So we're very, very excited about that. Now that we have everything of that covered, obviously our lead here, Tegan Martin Drysdale, wanted to stress that there is positivity in our community and that something that needed to be talked about was positivity. First and foremost, this series is all about building community with positivity for our recovery, but also about real, innovative solutions that you can use to help your business. When you hear the City of Champions, it's not just a cringeworthy shout out to the city's sports dominance of the 80s and 90s. In truth, we're not named the City of Champions solely because of stellar sports teams, but because our city's response to one of the worst natural disasters in Canadian history. After witnessing the community come together in the aftermath of Black Friday, the tornado that happened in 1987, our then mayor remarked, "This is truly the City of Champions." And this is the spirit of Edmonton. This is the spirit that we all carry within ourselves, and this is the spirit that has inspired this PIER speaking series. Through our 4-week series, we're going to be taking you through a set of stories about entrepreneurs who have faced hardship, people who have innovated to succeed, as well as a bunch of fun little anecdotes that I'm sure we're going to share here. This week, we're going to be building a mindset that will help you and your business recover, relaunch, and rebuild, and also get a glimpse into how businesses must adapt for our increasingly digital reality. Obviously today, we're all online and not being able to share this in person, so it's definitely a digital day, but considering the weather, pretty good day for us to move to digital. We have 2 amazing speakers here to tell you about themselves and their journeys, but also to convey some lessons learned for Edmonton's entrepreneur community as a whole. As a community that has faced serious and life-altering events like tornadoes, fires, floods, mad cow, crashing oil prices, this pandemic is just another challenge for Edmontonian entrepreneurs to face and to conquer. We hope that by building up our community and by sharing some lessons learned today, that you will get to continue with what you do best. Go full steam ahead in recovering, relaunching, and rebuilding. While we may have more great programming in the weeks ahead, a positive mental state and understanding our digital future is key to facing our new reality head on, which is why we're starting right here. Today we'll hear from Stacey Berger, a transformational coach for business and life, and Ameet Khabra, our expert in digital marketing. So without further ado, I'm gonna let Stacey take over here. One of the things that we'll be doing is having Stacey have a little talk here, and then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A, just a little micro one. Then we'll have Ameet speak with us, and then we'll be moving on to a little Q&A and then a bigger one for you guys. So make sure to put those questions right in the chat if you have any, and I'll convey that to them anytime. So take it away, Stacey.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Madison and Tegan, for putting this together. I was saying I think this is such a great idea, and I am a lover of entrepreneurship and business. So I have two passions, one of those being mindset and the other one being business. And when I get to combine those two worlds together, that really is my sweet spot and what I love. And I spent 16 years in the corporate world, climbing that corporate ladder, but inside the corporate world, working with entrepreneurs and mentoring entrepreneurs. And the parent company that I worked for, it was in operation for about 40 years. And we had started a secondary company that was meant to be the succession of the parent company. And I ran that company. And in the 10 years that I did that, we went from $1.6 million in revenue to over $60 million in revenue. And as I thought about what we're going through right now, I loved that business model. What we did is we raised investment capital, we raised bank financing, and then we mentored entrepreneurs, so people who wanted to own their business but didn't have the finances and didn't have the business experience, and really supported them in being just highly successful in their operations. I left that company in 2013 to start and became a certified life coach and really wanted to make a bigger impact in the world. But so much passion for that company, very entrepreneurial, incredible vision, great goals, and a really powerful team of movers and shakers. So we accomplished a lot. And today that company exists in just a very shell. It's pretty much obsolete now. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because we faced lots of competition. We faced different things that happened from a government perspective and the funding model, and lots of challenges, went through recessions, and it wasn't any of that that eventually was the demise of that organization. What it was the loss of vision. And what I would say is really taking on a fear mindset and losing focus on the vision, on the goal, on why that company existed in the first place. And I think that is such a powerful message for entrepreneurs right now and visionaries to remember. Henry Ford said, obstacles are those frightful things we see when we take our eyes off the goal. And so as we're talking about navigating what is obviously a very difficult situation for many, many business owners, I believe that this is the time where it's so important to put our eye back on our vision, on our goals, on why we're in our businesses, because it's so easy to get into this mindset of fear, of doubt, of worry, of all the problems, all the challenges, all the obstacles. Those are so in our face and so front and center right now that it's really easy to forget about why you're in business in the first place, what that vision was, why it's important to you. And in the absence of reconnecting to that, unfortunately, what happens for many organizations is they start to do this spiral downwards. And eventually that's what can lead to failures and shutdowns and mental challenges and emotional challenges. And so what I wanted to speak about today is resiliency. And I think that that's often a very strong characteristic of entrepreneurs, of innovators, is that resiliency. It's the ability to face challenges. It's the ability to face setbacks and move forward in spite of those adversities. And that's certainly our opportunity now. There's some really great examples of organizations. If you look in 2000, which the recession, and more so in the US, obviously we still faced it in Canada, but 2008 to 2010, a significant recession. And that's the time when companies like Uber, Pinterest, Airbnb, there's some incredible business models that were born out of that challenging time. And that's, I believe, is the opportunity, is to recognize, yeah, business might not look exactly like it used to. However, there's still incredible opportunities here. And I believe the number one thing to focus on, and the first thing, and I love that this is where you're starting this series off, is with your mindset, what's going on between here. Because it's ultimately what can make or break success. It's the difference between somebody winning the gold medal and not placing. It's often not about skill, it's not about ability, but it's about that mindset. And so resiliency, our ability to overcome adversity, is really a key factor right now. And so I wanted to offer 3 strategies to really increase your resiliency right now. And so how to do that when we're facing challenges. And I want to be really clear that I am not saying stick your head in the sand and pretend that this is not happening. There's 2 ends of the spectrum that we usually end up on. One is we stick our head in the sand and we ignore it. And the other is we catastrophize. And so we want to notice where we are on that spectrum. So it's not denying the challenges, it's not denying the obstacles, it's not denying all of the things that are on the to-do list, but it's also not catastrophizing them, which is where the media and the sensationalism tends to go. But it's really being able to bring that more into neutral. So number 1 tool to increase that resiliency is to lower stress. And that's really easy to say, not as hard to do, not as easy to do, not as easy to put into action. But what happens when we're in a heightened stress state of mind is we've got all of this cortisol that's shooting through our body. And we're in what would be called our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response. And when we're in that fight or flight, this is where our fear, our worry, our doubt, our overwhelm, when that exists, what happens is we are not able to be more in that creative mind. Solution-based thinking doesn't happen there. So in order to increase that resiliency, really, really important to have tools and practices in place to lower that stress, so that we can actually increase the oxytocin in our body and go more to that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest, digest, create. And so for every one of us, that's going to be different on how we get there. But this is things like getting outside, eating right, getting the right amount of sleep, meditating, journaling, connecting to your vision, finding little moments in your day where you're really doing your part to lower stress. And sometimes what happens as entrepreneurs, and I've owned my own business now for 5.5 years, I get it. We're busy. I've got 3 little kids that I'm homeschooling. There's lots to do. And sometimes those lower stress opportunities, the meditating, the getting out for a walk, they feel like they're not as important as the other things on our to-do list. But I would say if you can move that up the priority list, really, really important. So number 1, lower stress. The second thing to do to increase that resiliency is to challenge or change your perspective. Challenging and changing your perspective. We have the ability to give meaning to any situation that we're in. And this is our ability to say, is the glass half full or half empty? This is where we're maybe catastrophizing what's going on around us. And it's our ability to take a breath and to shift our perspective, to start asking different questions. Sometimes when we're in a really challenging situation, it's so close to us that we're not looking at the big picture. So our ability to ask different questions. I had a client, when all of this first hit, she said, oh, there goes my business, I'm done. And she had about 2 weeks of really living in that fear mindset, and through the work that we did together, lowering that stress, connecting to her vision, pretty soon she was able to ask herself the question, what if this was actually my best year yet in my business? So imagine changing your perspective and saying, well, how am I going to survive? What am I going to do? This is so bad. And just starting to get curious about what if this was actually the best year in my business? What good can come from this? What opportunities exist here? And by changing and challenging that perspective, asking different questions, what happens is we start to access that creative mind, and we have ideas that are different, and we start to brainstorm, and different opportunities present themselves, which obviously increases that resiliency. So number 1, lowering stress. Number 2, that ability to challenge and change your perspective. And the third resiliency move is to reach out and get support. As for those of you who are solopreneurs, or if you have a small business, or even as a leader of an organization, sometimes we fall into this lone ranger syndrome where I've got to figure it all out. I should have all the answers. We want to take on all that burden and responsibility ourselves. But by reaching out for support, asking for help, getting that support is really key in being able to overcome, not just overcome, but thrive in a time of adversity. And so reaching out for support, there's 3 different support systems that I would encourage you to have in your life. One is somebody who is not stuck in your situation. There's an expression that the instructions are always on the outside of the box. And when we're the ones inside the box, we're in the problem, we can't see the instructions. So this is having mentorship, having coaching, having an advisory group, if you have a board of directors, but having somebody who isn't in your situation, having that support system. Then I think it's important to have a peer group, people who are maybe navigating a similar situation, so you can bounce ideas off of each other. And then the third group that I would encourage you to have is somebody who's maybe not at the level that you are, that you can help reach that next level. But really paying attention to the types of conversations you're having. Are they positive conversations? Are they uplifting? Are they moving forward conversations? Or is the conversation you're in a majority of the day talking about the fear, the problems, the challenges, or is it more solution-based? So that third resiliency move is to reach out and get that support. And by putting those 3 things in place, really helps to build that mindset, build that resiliency. And the last thing that I would add is really getting greater clarity and connection back to your vision. When we get into that survival mode and just working on putting out the fires and what's coming at us right now, really easy to lose that vision. So reconnect to your vision, reconnect to why you're in business, and that'll help to increase that positive mindset as well. So there you go.
Amazing. Yeah. No, some of that, I think, like, it's so important. The mindset is where we needed to start. And so I really appreciate you sharing some of those tricks with us. That's very, very interesting. I'm going to start my first question off with the question that's going to continue throughout the series. Because in your experience, I'd love to know what you think makes Edmonton appealing as an entrepreneur.
I think it's Edmonton and Alberta, I would say, is a very entrepreneurial province. Edmonton's a very entrepreneurial city. And a couple things I love about Edmonton is it's a small, big city. And so very easy to be connected. I think the business community is actually pretty small and very, very supportive of each other. And the other thing about Edmonton is I think we're a get her done kind of city and energy and dynamic. And so not afraid to pull up our sleeves and get to work, right? So
definitely.
And again, really a resiliency based and innovative culture.
Definitely. I know you spoke a lot about how through challenging times we have to not panic, and I think that's also a big thing that people kind of forget is it's not, we're going to be okay, it will be all right, but it's all right to have a little bit of panic, but definitely to move past it, to keep going. um, I'm just wondering, in your opinion, if keeping these positive mindsets, I know you spoke about having like peer groups and things like that, so the importance of community and social connection, do you think that's something that's really, really integral for keeping this positive mindset?
Absolutely. It's essential. We're not meant to do life alone. So having that community, having that support to me is essential. It's really though paying attention to who your community is. Um, and making sure that that is an uplifting. And again, it doesn't mean that we don't have the hard conversations and here's the problems I'm facing, but it's done with the perspective that there's a solution here and I need some help to get to the solution. So being really aware of the community that you're in, but you want to be in a strong community for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely something we feel, right? As a co-working space, I know we have some of our community who's also sharing their video, which is nice to see their faces. And for us, especially as people who work at a co-working space, it's hard to wake up every morning and not see our members. So it's definitely something that we felt on a very personal level there. So I definitely feel that very, very personally there. But as an entrepreneur, if I was going to decide that I need to make changes to my business, what's the first thing really that I need to be prepared for? Because, like deciding and making that decision seems to be the biggest step.
Yeah. Yeah, I talk a lot about the power of decision in the work that I do and the importance of decision making. A couple of things when it comes to decision making, I always encourage people not to make those decisions when you're in a real anxious, fear-based state. That's never going to lead to your best ideas and your best version of yourself. And so, and again, I would say back to the vision and back to why am I doing what I'm doing, and to make sure that the decisions you're making are in alignment with that vision, your core values, and what's important to you. Not because it's what you think you should be doing or people are telling you what you're doing, but as long as you stay true to yourself and you're making those decisions, that's number one.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely really like that. I know Tegan's definitely relating to that point pretty well. So one thing I want to talk about is we're dealing with a lot of realities right now. It can be super, super overwhelming. And I know some people, when they get overwhelmed, they just kind of, they freeze up. They can't make any choices. If you're going to try to plan for things, what's the most important thing that you would think that you should focus on to keep your business sustainable through this?
That's a great question. And you're absolutely right. When we get into overwhelm, we tend to freeze or panic, and usually not very productive in that state. A couple of things, right now I would say number one is safety for yourself, for your team, for your customers. And the other thing is a small business owner and any business owner, where I say you want to focus on the needle moving activities. And unless you've got a ton of cash and you're doing good cash, it's usually what's going to make the cash register ring. So that's the most important thing. So if you look at your to-do list and everything that's going on, what are those activities? What are those steps that I can take that are the easiest to make that cash register ring? Because once you've got that cash flow going again, then it's easier to take on those other projects and those other initiatives. And the other thing that I like to say to people is baby steps will take you all the way up Mount Everest. And so decision and action are two really important energies, but it's do something. Just take one little baby step, cross one thing off your list. And what it does is it creates this momentum, and set yourself up for success. Don't try and do 12 hours worth of work in 2 hours. It's being realistic and being honest with yourself and pre-planning, working with your calendar. Okay, what are the 2 or 3 things that I want to accomplish today? and then get those done and then focus on tomorrow, but really breaking it down. I'm hoping that's helpful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. As we go into reopening, right, it can seem like you have to pull up the government regulations, you have to figure out all these things. And so maybe even just focusing on today, I'm going to figure out if I need a mask policy.
Yes.
That might be the best way to move forward then.
Yeah, I would say break it down and into the smallest steps. And yeah, sometimes what happens, especially when it's new, right? This is all brand new. So it feels overwhelming. And so just get started. And what's the one thing? Well, I can log onto the website. I can do that. Even if it needs to be that simple, just to break that first barrier. Yeah.
For sure. Well, I'm going to open it up that if anybody has any specific questions for Stacey, we'll do a little quick one here and we will be able to ask her questions again later. So don't worry, she's not going anywhere. But if anybody has any, I'd love to be able to answer those. So we'll just let the chat give it a second here. But no, I think a lot of that were really, really great suggestions for just even knowing where to start. I know that's the biggest and most overwhelming one. But we do have a question. How do you tackle overcoming the fear of asking for help from your peers or mentors? That's a good one.
Great question. Yeah, really great question, Haley. So fear is such a funny thing. And typically fear shows up when we're about to grow or when we're doing something outside of our comfort zone. And so one of the great ways to overcome that fear is to connect you by asking for that help. Where is it going to take me? So it's starting with the end in mind. So there's a reason you need help, and what you're looking for. So where will that take you? And asking for that help, is that worth overcoming the fear in order to get where I want to go? And that works with, if you're scared to make a sales call. So not to focus on the sales call, but where could making that sales call ultimately take me? So I would say going 2 or 3 steps forward in the mental picture of it. So why do I want to ask for help? Where could it take me? Another, Haley, I would say what I like to say is ask the coach in the mirror. So if a friend was asking you this question, what would you tell them? And chances are you would tell them, well, just ask. What's the worst thing they can say is no. Much easier to say for somebody else than to say for ourselves. So to be that coach in the mirror can be really important. The other thing that I would say to that is asking for help. Think of a time where somebody asked you for help and you felt so good helping them. And it actually lifted you up by being able to offer your expertise or your time and how good that felt. And imagine if the person that you're going to ask is going to feel so good by helping you. Not denying them of that experience is another great way to look at that. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I see maybe Tegan, did you have something to?
Yeah, what I'm seeing happen on social media and in the conversations I'm having is, because I've been doing a lot of mindset work myself, being an entrepreneur, when you're especially when you're a sole owner, you need to be strong in order to be strong for your team, and then also be strong for your clients and your external relationships. So it is important to get that mindset work and figure out what works for you first and foremost, and get to that work right away. But I am seeing out in the marketplace, people also feeling like there's pressure to have the perfect routine and to be meditating and stuff. And so I've actually seen comments where that just feels like it's setting up an idea of the perfect entrepreneur that they then feel like they're failing at too. So it's like a double failure feeling. And so I just find that very interesting because I can see where that is coming from, but I also want to know, how do you respond to that fear of not only failing or not showing up in your business, but then the added pressure of like, you have to be, pivoting and hustling and working extra hard during a crisis like this. So
Yeah, I love that, and you're right. We've put on these, we call it comparison despair, right? We compare what everybody else or what we think we should be doing, and that puts this added pressure, which creates resistance, which works on that spiral going the other way. I agree. What you said, Tegan, is we have to find what works for us. What I would say is, if you've never meditated, if you don't have a practice, take 3 deep breaths and be proud that you took 3 deep breaths. And so for each one of us, it's knowing where we are and what's that one thing that's going to move us forward, and doing the best we can in every single day. And sometimes the best we can do is we're going to get up and we're going to meditate, and we're going to work out, and we're going to do something in our business, and we're going to feel really great. And the next day, the best we can do is, you know what, I got out of my pajamas. And to know that we're going to have that fluctuation. I think the other piece that I really work with clients is celebrating your wins. So we get so focused sometimes on what we're not doing and what we're not accomplishing that we forget that what we are doing. And so celebrating what you are doing and giving yourself permission to be okay with that, I think is really, really important. But yeah, I think it's a really great point taken. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's super valuable. So thank you for sharing that. We'll keep you around, obviously, for some more questions. If they want to come through, feel free to put them through the chat this whole time. And then when we get to it, I'll be able to pass this on. I think one of the biggest pressures right now is honestly to go digital. And that's the perfect segue actually for Ameet, because it's huge right now. Everybody it's the panic, right? Instantly, everybody was like, I want a Facebook page. I want this page. I want this. I want that. And maybe they don't know how to do that. So we have somebody here, luckily, who is an expert who will be able to talk about that. So our lovely AdWords girl, Ameet, is going to fill us in.
Yeah. Hi. So I'm like way less prepared than Stacey was.
Don't worry. That's the thing that we just talked about. We all did that. We're not in our pajamas. So there we go.
Oh, I'm definitely in my pajamas.
I mean, as long as it's comfy, right?
I was like, nobody can see my pants. Why even put regular one on? Like,
I don't blame you.
Yeah, so my name is Ameet. I'm AdWords girl on, I think, every social platform at this point. I'm not the biggest fan of the word entrepreneur for whatever reason, and I've had like Instagram lives with Beverly, even the podcast where we rant about it a little bit. So I like to call myself a small business owner because that's exactly what I am, I guess. So my journey, I guess, technically started when I was 5. When I started with my little lemonade stands and we were selling cookies door to door that were store bought because we were like, let's try it. And I wrote to my cousin, or not my cousin, my brother, and then all the neighborhood kids and got them to do all the work. And then I just did all the sorting of the cash really at the end of it all, and then gave them little allowances. And I think that's probably the moment I realized that I was supposed to be doing this, but who knows? But in, I guess, all seriousness, my actual, I guess, first serious company actually started when I was 19. So I was in school for I was in school for business administration, realized I hated macroeconomics, so moved into the marketing program because the most credits moved over to the program. And I am so grateful for that moment, just because I wouldn't have been here otherwise, I don't think. So we had one class on digital marketing, so it was like 3-hour class about email, SEO, Google, social, I think, and that was the end of it. So I don't know what happened in that class, but it was enough to spark an interest for me. So when I went off to do the event planning class while I was still in school, I started selling tickets online because I was like, well, this makes sense, right? And 3 years later, I realized that I actually really liked doing ads and not so much on the event planning side, because there's just so many people to deal with, and with PPC, I can be just me. So I was like, well, this sounds better. I don't have to deal with people anymore. So I closed up shop, decided to pursue digital marketing actually at that point. Moved to Alberta, so I'm originally from BC. And basically what it felt like overnight was I was spending $350, and then the next day I was spending $4.3 million annually. So there was a massive learning curve, and how I got that job, I will never be able to tell you because I was so underqualified for it. But it actually kind of started my career as AdWords girl, really, at that point. So from that, I was able to get spotlighted by Google as an up-and-comer, and then eventually I was admitted into their Rising Star program. And there was only 5 Canadians, and 2 of us were from Western Canada. So I think 25 and 20, I think it was 25 in total across North America. So it was a really cool experience because I got to do a lot of beta testing and actually work on like some kinks that we didn't really like. So we were actually part of like the whole testing program as well. So a lot of people will come up to me and be like, this exam question's on there. And I'm like, that's kind of my fault. And it's kind of cool to still be able to see that even years later, because I left about 3 years ago. And then eventually, I think a year after, they actually ended up just canceling the entire program and introducing something new. But it was a really great experience in itself. So after I left the auto dealership that was spending that $4.3 million, I actually went off to an agency in the city. And I learned quite a bit. I was actually able to round up my skill set. So I was able to learn more about SEO, social media, content, email, and all of those other things. Because for the most part, my experience was basically in paid advertising. And then while I was working there, I kind of realized that I hated agencies. Decided to create my own in a sense. And at that time, I thought it was kind of like the anti-agency, and turned out it was kind of the start of the niche movement, really. As cocky as it sounds, I really want to credit myself for the niche movement in Edmonton. So I'm going to, because really at that point, there wasn't a lot of niche agencies out there. There was a lot of full service. And eventually at one point, I kind of just sat there and went, if I'm good at one thing, why not just promote that one thing versus trying to be mediocre at everything else? And it's worked out pretty well. So I've been in business since technically 2014, as I started as like a freelancer, but I think I took this full time 2015, 2016. I've kind of lost track of time at this point. And it's been really great ever since. I think we have our ups and our downs. And when COVID hit, we saw a lot of clients panicking and slashing their budgets, and then 2 weeks later going, oh, false alarm, it's okay. And unfortunately, a couple of them had to close down because they're not essential services. So it'll be kind of interesting to watch what happens on that front, because for a couple months, they haven't been making an income. But to make an income, they need to advertise. And then there's like this never-ending circle where it's just like, where exactly do we finally come back in and start supporting you guys? So it's an interesting issue that we've kind of come across. But with the extra time, well, I feel like there's extra time. I don't really know if there is, but I feel like there's a lot of extra time right now. So the way that we've been spending our time is actually just going out and doing more education pieces, and focusing really on that and kind of doubling down on that. So we revamped our newsletter. So now instead of one monthly newsletter of like this massive long topic, we've broken it down into 4 newsletters. So that way everyone can actually take some time to actually digest that information, ask questions if they need to. There's a video component to it that we'll be having, so that way people can at least see me talking about the topic and maybe understand it a little bit better. So we're trying to cover our bases on that front. And then social media, we've started doing our Talk PPC to Me series again, which happens about once a week or once every other week. And then also just staying really active in all the Slack groups that we're already in. So there's the Edmonton Startup Group, there's a Digital Marketing Edmonton group as well. So not hopefully, but staying active in those as much as we possibly can, and making sure that we're there for everybody who actually needs that kind of help. I'm very fortunate that I've got really great friends, and most of them own businesses. So it's easy for me to go talk to them about the struggles that we're having. But not everybody has that there for them. So it's been really, really important to me to be a little bit more active on Instagram, talking about what I do for a living, obviously, because nobody really quite understands it, unfortunately. But then also making sure that people who are reaching out are being at least heard at that very least. So if they're looking for some help, then it's giving them help without asking too many questions. If it's just support and they're looking for an ear, I'm around. yeah, that's kind of it, really. I don't know what else to
For
talk
sure. Yeah, no, I definitely, a lot of that really resonated. I know speaking with some of our members, I had a kind of eye-opening conversation with one of them. My background came from marketing as well, and we had a little bit of a conversation about that marketing is essential. And she was like, well, I figured out accounting. Haven't bothered to figure out how to do marketing. And I was like, those are just as important. And if you're not realizing that before, I think people are really seeing that now.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's been really interesting. So I was part of ATBX as well, so the winter cohort. So I got lucky in that I was allowed to join more than one mastermind group because I'm that weird person who's like, let's just do all of them. I'm already here. What difference does it make? And in one of them, just as this hit, it was an engineering company who was like, oh, I'm just cutting out all discretional funds really at this point, or discretionary funds. So he's like, that's marketing, that's this, that's that. And like kind of sat there and I was like, but then how are you going to get more work? Like the logic never really followed through. But he's like, it's money that we're spending. And I'm like, I'm fully aware, but if it's making you money, it's technically not money that you're spending, it's money that you're making. And I think that's where a lot of, it's really an education thing. A lot of people understand social media, a lot of people understand content and website development and all those things. But when it comes to pay-per-click, because it's still relatively new, but also kind of like a completely foreign language, even within digital marketing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people seem to just easily just kind of discredit it and be like, well, it's costing me money, which I mean, it is, but if you're doing it right, it's also making you cash. So yeah, there's a massive learning curve that still needs to happen within businesses across the planet, not even just in Edmonton.
Mm-hmm. I know 100% the first time you open up AdWords, if you have a panic attack, I think it's okay. It's a very, very different platform than your typical any other way that you would be promoting online, right? And it isn't something that you just pick up.
Yeah, and especially on the AdWords side of things, it's the most different out of all the advertising platforms like LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. Those guys are built to be dummy proof in a sense. Like it's pretty straight and narrow. Google Ads has quite a bit more intricacies within it. So it does take quite some time to figure out, which I can understand. But even just on like, if we're talking about Facebook advertising, it's still seen as an expense when it tends to outperform anything else really at that point. So it's kind of interesting just talking to business owners and seeing where they kind of land when they talk about marketing, or even digital agencies and seeing what they're doing for their own marketing, which is basically nothing at this point. So it's kind of really funny that we'll sit around talking about how we can advertise or promote a business, and then we don't do it for ourselves at the end of it all.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, I would say. And I do want to ask you the question that I asked with Stacey as well, especially as somebody who converted from BC to Edmonton. For you, like what made Edmonton special? What made it want to be the place where you started a business?
I actually don't know why I moved to Edmonton in the first place, if I'm going to be entirely honest. It was kind of one of those moments where I woke up one morning and went, I'm moving, and Edmonton was like the closest yet the furthest away from everyone at that point. So 5 days later, I had all my bags packed and I was in Edmonton with I had no apartment, no nothing. We figured it out just as we got here. And it was quite the thrill really at that point. And I think just, being someone who had moved out for the first time, it was just an exciting experience for me in general. And then just being in a new city that was actually a lot friendlier than I thought was really great. So I think that's why I stayed. The reason I started my business was literally for the community at this point. Like the digital marketing community, yes, we're small, but we're pretty tight knit. And even if we're competition, we still support each other, which is something that I never really thought I would see. Because I tried running the business out of BC for a couple of years, and it is not like that here at all. Like it is not. I would try to meet up with people, and they always thought there was some kind of ulterior motive. And I was like, no, we do this in Edmonton. I could walk into an agency and sit down, and nobody's going to question me. And it was not the case there, obviously. So they're way more competitive, and they seem to think that everyone's kind of just trying to take everyone's business. And that wasn't the case for me at the very least. So I think when I came back, it was very much because of that community. I think there's more people who, or at least in my circle, who own businesses, and I really appreciate that about people, is when they're doing something that makes them happy. Whereas in BC, everyone's, or at least in my circle, I should probably preface that, they they get their job and then they're just looking to settle down, and that's kind of the end of it. And I'm not that person, so I'm the one who sticks out like a sore thumb every single time. So I think that's why I keep on coming back to Edmonton, even when I try to leave it, because it's just, it always seems to call me back. And I really love that one building that has that sign where it says, take a risk. It's the most Edmonton thing to do. And I was like, I feel that, like I can relate to that so much. So I think that's quite literally why I come back, is that Edmonton is that place that actually encourages you to move forward and do something. And I've always, appreciated that.
Yeah, that's definitely a great answer. I think I've definitely felt something similar. I know I did my my undergraduate degree in Ottawa, but that was it, and then back home, because there's something very, very special about Edmonton. And for us, like, we're in the old CKUA building at Homestead, and when you're in a building that was made in 1909, you feel all of the energy of Edmonton. And when you stand up there and you can see the rest of downtown building around it, it's super inspiring, and I love that feeling. So I'm right there with you. But being with, like, your businesses can be remote based, so I know you've been working out of Vancouver. Is that something that has been really rough for you, or has it just kind of been like an easy transition? I know we talked about the time difference, but beyond that, has it been like kind of easy to continue since you are more remote based?
I mean, in theory it should be, but I spent those 2.5 months that I was actually allowed to leave the house in Edmonton, building kind of this life where I would be going into like an office and working there, or I had started teaching at the U of A as well. So I'd always be out all the time around people. And then when I'd come home, it was kind of like that, let's debrief and just kind of hang out and relax. And then all of a sudden it became, oh, I'm just gonna hang out and relax at home all day, versus actually working. So it's been a rough transition for me, just because I don't feel very motivated to get a lot of work done. So whenever I have the energy to do something, I usually just like go through everything that I need to do, versus pushing myself to work when I don't want to. Because I already know if I'm working when I don't want to, I'm not going to be producing the great work that I like to pride myself on. So it's been a little difficult. If this was like 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I think my answer would be completely different, because I was working from home full time at that point. But yeah, now that I've gotten the taste of being in an office with a few people here and there, it's kind of hard to go backwards.
Oh, 100%. I think, like, a co-working space, we know that 100%. There's a lot of people, this is their first time not working from Starbucks or from their couch or something like that. And the community starts and it forms, and then they just feel like, oh, now I'm by myself again. And it's not the best feeling. So we definitely have been dealing with that with our membership, and trying to make that something that they're not experiencing alone. And like,
and I think the fact that when you're kind of a solo in the business, or you're the only one who owns it, is quite a bit harder, because you don't really have anybody else to lean on that front. So I kind of really envy all my friends who have business partners, because I'm like, at least you have that other person to go talk to, and they can at least pick up the work that you've left off. And although I do have staff, but at the same time, some of them, they're very specialized in what they do, so sometimes they can't do what I do, which creates more problems in itself. So I'm kind of kicking myself in the butt for going for specialists versus a little bit more generalists on my team. And I was like, this is a great selling point. No, I'm like, no, this kicked me in the butt.
for sure. Yeah, that's pretty interesting as well. So along with what we've been doing, I know there's been a lot of trends beyond TikTok dances, but have you seen any big marketing trends during COVID? beyond the the emails we've all received of, we know this is a troubling time?
Yeah, actually, those emails, Beverly actually wrote a really great newsletter about that. And it was something that I never really considered is that you're getting, like, yes, you're getting the emails, they're really, really annoying, but the genius part about them is that you're being reminded of that brand. So even if you bought like a knife 3 years ago, now you remember that knife that you bought 3 years ago. So it's a great opportunity for businesses to kind of get back into the limelight in terms of being in front of their audience. But I think the biggest trends I've seen so far, some aren't even within like paid advertising. There's like the use of AR at this point. So using like clothing brands or makeup brands, kind of implementing that a little bit more. So that way people can shop online with full confidence, because with makeup you're going to want to go inside and actually try it on and see what it looks like or something along those lines, right? So that's been a big thing where a lot of brands have started implementing that within them, their shopping experiences. We've seen a lot of people actually move to SEO a little bit more and leave traditional marketing. So I think the last study that I read said that SEO converts at 14.6%, where traditional actually converts at 1.7%. So it's significantly higher. So we're seeing a lot of people just kind of leave their traditional means and actually go into more SEO work and look at that long-term type of marketing. Within paid advertising, what we've seen is something, it's not really actually very interesting, or it's not, well, I don't find it very interesting, I guess. It's that there's less competition now, because a lot of people had slashed their budgets or completely removed themselves because they seem to think that still selling is icky in a sense. But people are still buying. Like, we have a jewelry client and they kill it every single month, like maybe 12 times the dollars that they make. So they put in $1, they make 12 off of it. It's absolutely insane. So there's still a really great opportunity. It's more or less just making sure that like in what language you need to talk to your clients. Especially on Facebook, you can't exploit COVID as a selling point. So using hashtags stay home in an ad won't run. So you have to be a bit more clever with what you're doing. Obviously talk to the audience as if you are fully aware of what's happening in the world, but not so much that you're using it as like the selling proposition really at that point. And then because competition has left, it's actually quite a bit cheaper now to advertise too. So you can kind of get more, let's stretch out of your dollar, I guess you can say, which has been really, really interesting to watch, because some of our clients have seen like a 50% discount basically at this point, and then some have seen like a 4%, but regardless, it's still a discount. So I don't really care if it's 4% or 50% at this point. And then the last thing that I've noticed is there's lower conversion. So not especially if we're talking about like lead-based type of businesses. So one of our bigger clients is Daytona Homes. So we've seen a decrease in their, like the forms that are coming in. But what we've noticed is that there's a higher intent. So people who are searching for bigger purchases like that are very serious about it at this point, because really no one's going to be trying to figure out if they can get a mortgage or not at this point in time if they don't know that they have a job later, if that makes sense. I don't know if I worded that correctly.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so what we've seen is lower conversions but higher intent, and really at this point I will take higher intent all day long. So it's still a really great time for everybody to advertise. It's more or less just making sure that you know what platform to kind of go on, and whether or not it's actually a good fit for you. So it's not something that all businesses should be doing. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. So it's more or less identifying that it's the right fit and then figuring out what platform that you really do need to be on.
That's awesome. Yeah. I am going to open it up. So if anybody does have any questions for Ameet, right now is the best time, as well as anything for Stacey. That was really, really helpful. And knowing your audience is such a big part of all business, right? And I think people get a little scared as soon as they imagine digital marketing. That is, it's a whole new world for some people. And so I think they definitely want some help with it. Beverly's got a question. What's the best way to get started in doing PPC for your own business? So PPC for non-marketers, just so
PPC is pay per click.
There we go.
So you're basically, it's the model is essentially that you only pay when someone clicks on your ad, which is why it's such, it's kind of attractive to a lot of businesses, because then they know that somebody actually entered their website and that's why they paid for it. And the also really great thing about PPC is that you can track everything, which I love. So if a certain keyword brought a conversion, I'll know exactly what that keyword is, and it's really great. But back to Beverly's question, I would start small, maybe. I think it's more or less of first trying to figure out what your end goal is. So if you have like an existing clientele that's super active on your website, and you've got a lot of traffic, then maybe starting with something like retargeting would be a really great place to go. If you're a new brand and you're trying to create like search volume in a sense, so if it's a new product, not a lot of people know about it, so they're obviously not searching on Google. I would go more Facebook, Instagram to create that demand. But if it's like homes like Daytona, then going Google might make the most sense, because at the very least, people are coming to your website, looking at it, and then at least submitting that form. You don't necessarily need to start with like thousands upon thousands of dollars. So it's more or less of whatever you're comfortable with. I would say at least 250-ish really at this point, but yeah, it really just depends on what you're able to afford, which is really the greatest thing about PPC, is that you can run with any budget.
Awesome. Tegan just hopped off because, as you all seem to know, when you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner, there's always a call to have. So she just wanted to make sure to thank both of you for answering questions today and coming and sharing your stories, because things like this really, really are beneficial, and hearing from people who are going through similar things is really important. Like we talked about today, community is so important and so different, and hearing about how much happier the digital marketing community is in Edmonton just makes me so happy. I love hearing that, because it is a different place, and I think that's something that we definitely need to acknowledge. But first, I really want to thank you both on behalf of Homestead, as well as obviously Tegan, but Alicia and Kirsten as well. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to even come in and talk to us, because I know it's hard to commit to anything these days, it seems, for some people, but it's definitely, we definitely appreciate that. We have
found in that location.
Sorry, that was me.
no worries. I was like, oh, we got Zoom bombed. But luckily we didn't get Zoom bombed, so it's going pretty well so far, which is lovely, because we have 3 more speaker series coming up. So today we talked a lot about resiliency, which is something that we really need to start with, and something that can get everybody kind of inspired to continue on your journey and to help finding resources and the people that you can reach out to, especially in a digital world. Like, just make sure you message them on Instagram or Twitter or any of those things. And it's never too hard to reach out. People are very, very receptive for these things. Next week, we do have some people that you might recognize. So we've got Tyler Butler coming in, which will be really fun. He's the Senior Manager of External Communications, or STORY, from ATB. He also is one of the most innovative social media geniuses I've ever worked with. He's actually the person who taught me how to use Buffer, so I'm really excited to have him come in. They're going to talk a little bit about the ATB Goodness Grows campaign, which is going to be really, really fun to hear about, as well as we have Ariel de Rosario. So Billy Sticks is coming in. Unfortunately, he won't have usual samples like he normally brings for people, because we did not get all of your addresses, but you never know, right, in the future. But he's the founder of the first ever food truck in Edmonton. So we're definitely going to hear a lot about pivoting, but a lot about adaptation and the innovation that it takes to try something and make it great. So I just want to thank everybody who did participate. If you don't register on the site for next week, it is the same Zoom link, so don't worry if you lose the registry for that. But thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next Thursday. And in my cheesy way, I wrote this, my little exit, which was, we'll see you at the same Zoom time on the same Zoom channel. So Gotta have a little Batman reference, of course. But thank you everybody for spending your lunch hour with us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.